Forestry and Cemetery Commission is dedicated to the phased implementation of the Normal Hills Cemetery Master Plan, which was commissioned in 2014 with the full support of the council. Lees and Associates recommended in the executive summary of the master plan, when addressing the need for adequate burial space to serve the demands of the community for the next 25 years, it stated that the city should, and I quote, develop the 6.3 acres of undeveloped land. And using the concept design in this plan, the land will provide adequate capacity for 50 to 75 years of use. End quote. The members of the commission unanimously request that any undeveloped property within the Normal Hill Historic Cemetery and Arboretum not be included in the council's considerations for sale of undeveloped city properties. We'd be happy to provide further data showing the potential value to the city of this property once it's developed to expand the current cemetery. And we thank you very much for your consideration. And as citizen Shirley Phillips, I want to thank you all for your Herculean efforts in getting my yard watered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. State your name. Welcome, Councillor. Are there further citizen comments today? I don't see any. We'll move on to our next agenda item, the active agenda, Roman numeral 4. Item A, Urban Renewal Agency appointment. Considering the appointment of Jim Kleberg as the City Council representative on the Urban Renewal Agency, filling the vacancy left by Councillor Towsley. I move to appoint Jim Kleberg as the City Council representative on the Urban Renewal Agency to serve the remainder of Councillor Towsley's term.
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Towsley to appoint Jim Kleberg as the City Council representative on the Urban Renewal Agency to serve the remainder of Councillor Towsley's term. Is there discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, councillors. Next up, we have item B, Fire Department Vehicle Replacement. Considering the trade-in of a new long bed pickup rescue pickup that was purchased by the fire department for a short bed that will fit in the fire station and maneuver safely. We have Chief Reitmeyer with us here today. Chief, if you'd please introduce yourself for the record. You do have microphones above your head, and we have to kind of speak up loudly and clearly in this room so those listening at home can hear what we have to say. So welcome. The floor is yours, Chief.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Your Fire Chief, Greg Reitmeyer, serving in an interim capacity. I come before you today with an explanation of an odd situation and an open, transparent approach to finding a solution, and then also what we're doing to steps we're taking to resolve this issue and prevent it from happening again in the future. See if I can. There we go. Up. So a little bit of history. We work with the fleet department on our vehicle replacement schedule, and they set a schedule for when we replace vehicles, and we put money into that fund every year. Our current vehicle, this vehicle, shop number 10, is a 1999 Ford F550, and it was scheduled for replacement this year. Back in August of 22, we did a needs analysis, and we looked at the style of vehicle and what it's being used for, and felt that a replacement of an F550 in that body style would not best meet the needs of the city. It's a much more expensive vehicle than we thought would meet the needs. And we looked at a 1-ton crew cab pickup truck with a toolbox canopy and a slide tray similar to our current Battalion 71 is what we thought would best suit that need and meet the business needs for the vehicle. When we went out to bid for that in the fall and the vehicle was purchased, it arrived in May The first time I was up at the shop and saw it was early here in July, and I noted that it was a long bed pickup that we had taken delivery of. And so I started to work with the shop manager to identify the issue and what we could do about a vehicle that we really doesn't fit and meet the needs of the fire department. So what we have here is that the issue at hand is our bid specification and the needs analysis didn't match up. What we'd asked for and what got bid, the documentation was all proper. I missed it when I did the review of the bid. The business need, we use it as a backup for our current rescue vehicle, so it needs to haul some of the electronic tools, the electronic extrication tools that we use now that are lighter than the old tools that had a separate generator that went with them. And the struts that we use now are fiberglass instead of steel struts. And so a lot of the equipment's lighter than that 550 needed to haul. And we would only use this in a backup capacity for the rescue, so we can put the tools on the slide-out tray and they can be transported effectively. Could also serve as a backup for our command vehicle. Currently, right now, if our command pickup truck goes out for service or mechanical problems, we have to use one of our brush rigs or what you saw the vehicle this is replacing, which so you go to a dually longer vehicle, much more difficult to navigate the streets of Lewiston and to get into the residential neighborhoods where the battalion chief typically would go to command a fire. The other thing we use it for is a tow vehicle for our breathing apparatus trailer or for one of the many trailers that we have in the city that we carry specialized equipment in. So when we look at the business needs for the vehicle, the turning radius of that vehicle into small areas and the parking place that we have where we would store it, both of those need a short bed pickup for that situation. So the turning radius, when you look at the two different vehicles, it's about 3 feet turning radius, which if you're turning in a diameter in a turning around on the street, that's a 6 foot wider area that it takes to turn that vehicle around. Overall length is 2 feet, a little over 2 feet longer, and the wheelbase, that's what goes into the turning radius of that. So vehicle there on the left, that's our current battalion vehicle, short bed quad cab pickup. That is what we had envisioned getting and what I missed on the bid spec. The SCBA trailer is what parks right behind that, and then in the front of that area is Rescue 71, which is our current rescue vehicle, which is actually 30 inches shorter in wheelbase than the old rescue vehicle. One of the decisions was made when we got that vehicle was to get to a shorter vehicle for these same problems. So it just kind of shows you the parking layout in the stations. Currently, when we put all 3 units in there, we have 31 inches of space to pass between the vehicles or get around them. The industry standard for safety reasons is 3 feet to allow for egress. You know, we're going to emergency calls when we're trying to get through those spaces and you don't want to injure your people, catch a knee on a trailer hitch or something like that. And the new vehicle, if we put that in there, it'll reduce us to 25 inches in between. So just a little over 2 feet. And you can all imagine trying to get between that if you're in a hurry or carrying any gear. So 3 solutions that we looked at when we identified the issue. Working with Fleet, we said, could we put the vehicle in place somewhere else in the city? Is there another department in the next year or two that needs a long bed quad cab 1-ton pickup truck? And the report back from Fleet was there wasn't any. There wasn't a place to put that vehicle. The other option we looked at then is, well, could we trade this in and then purchase a correct vehicle next year through the dealership? And so the dealership has worked with us on that with the trade-in value and the cost of a new pickup would be about $7,300 that the fire department would have to spend from this year's budget to make up that difference. It'll take about 6 months to get that vehicle in, which is something we can deal with. The good news, if there's any, is all of the emergency lighting and upfit equipment that was purchased for the other vehicle will fit. The 2024 cab is the same as the 2023 cab. So we were happy to find that information out. And then the last option would be to trade Shop 11 for a similar 2023 vehicle with the dealership. And Rogers is looking at that for us. They might, they're trying to shop out and see if any place has something that we could just swap straight across for or would be a little bit cheaper. They asked, could we do a 3/4 ton instead of a 1 ton or a diesel instead of a gas? And we've given them some leeway in that to try to meet the best needs of all parties concerned. things that some steps we're taking in the future already with the vehicles that we've got on order. Right now, we're specing the 2 medic units and a ladder truck to come in a few more months. We'll start getting to work on that, is to make sure that we document our needs analysis, that we line by line say this is what we need, and it's very clear instead of some phone conversations or some casual conversations, to make sure we have a clear needs documented, to make sure when we review the bid specification, that we do a checklist basically back and forth and make sure that we're catching all that stuff. And then to have multiple reviewers, so we don't have a single point of failure where one person missed something and then it continued on to get to the point where we took delivery of something that we weren't intending to get. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Councilors?
Mayor?
Councilor Forsman?
So just to go back, this happened because it was more conversation versus like documented, this is what we need. And that's why we got the wrong.
It started out as just conversations and loose emails back and forth, but never really a very clear this. And so when you say, hey, I want something like this, that can end up, all it takes is one person's memory, one person, oh, that's right, or just to make an assumption, oh, it's a big fire department pickup, so it had to be a long bid. It's really not that important. I missed it. The final bid came to me. It said long bid on there, and I didn't catch that it was on there. So that goes on me. However the process got there, I got to see it last.
Councilor Spicklemeyer?
Mayor, so Chief, on the agenda, we have the action item was to approve number 2. So you showed 3 of them. So number 3, how long would you be willing to sit and wait for the number 3 action?
I've been waiting for 2 weeks and it's been killing me. I think that we're asking Rogers dealership to really do a kindness to try to find us a solution. And they're looking, I think that once council has direction that it was important working with finance and with the mayor, that this is a transparent process and it comes before council. Once we have authorization to move forward, what we don't want to do is let the vehicle that we have depreciate in trade-in value. So we're wanting to get that there as quickly as possible and get them under contract for the new one. And then I would say if they come up with something in that period of time, we'd certainly be willing to work that out. It kind of gets into some of the nuts and bolts of purchasing rules that I follow and I'm learning more and more.
Councilor Spicklemeyer?
So the follow-up, I'm always curious, it says it would come, the extra $7,300 would come from their budget. So is there something from your FY23 budget that you're not going to purchase?
That's exactly what we'll have to do. We'll have to go through and make decisions about things that we wouldn't buy that we would have bought.
Councilor Lidkey?
Where's the long bed vehicle now?
It's parked at Civ Shop.
So covered, protected,
It's out inside the fenced area.
just wondering if there's any way that Rogers would house it while they shop to protect what's gonna be theirs.
Certainly something I can have that conversation tomorrow morning with them. Yeah, the sooner we get it off of where it could get chipped, dinged, anything.
Councilors, further questions? Councilor Schroeder?
Motion in order?
Yes, Councilor.
I move to approve the trade-in and purchase of the short bid pickup for the fire department.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Towsley to approve the trade-in and purchase of a short bid pickup for the fire department. Is there discussion? Councilor Lidkey?
I'd like to make sure that we clarify not to exceed the amount as stated in the staff report of $7,300. And to recognize that option 3 is a viable option if done timely.
Okay, that was not in the original motion, but
Would you like me to say I accept that, or would you like me to re-motion?
if the second is willing to withdraw his second,
I'll
I'll
withdraw.
let you restate the motion.
Okay. I don't know that what is it, 7,000?
73.
73,000?
7,300.
Thank you very much. Okay, a motion to approve the trade-in and purchase of the short bed pickup for the fire department, so long as it does not exceed 7,300. And what else was it you wanted?
I think that covers it,
Okay.
that allows for the other option.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
It's been moved by Counselor Schroeder, second by Counselor Towsley to approve the trade-in and purchase of a short bed pickup truck for the fire department, not to exceed $7,300 in additional expense. Is there discussion? Counselor Spickmeyer?
I just think I would be more in favor of this if we had a timeline that allowed for option number 3 of, just, to me, 2 weeks is pretty short. I mean, 60 days isn't gonna drop the value of the pickup, in my mind. And it might save you $7,300.
What was explained to me is the 2024 model year are starting to hit the lot in August, and that's what puts us against a wall with the 2023 for the trade-in value. I'm happy to do. The used car game is it's hard for me to swallow that it lost that much value. It doesn't even have 200 miles on it. So I can tell you I will fervently approach or try to get the other deal worked, because I would rather be able to take that money and spend it on the firefighters that, get the equipment for them.
Counselor Forsman?
So I guess bringing it back to his point, so they specified to you once those 24 models hit the lot, kind of how much you're expecting to see a depreciation in the vehicle?
They haven't told us how much. The original offer they gave us on the trade-in was good for a week. So we're working on that, trying to get this done.
Clerk Brockey?
Council President Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Towsley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, counselors. Thank you, Chief Reitmeyer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselors, next we'll jump to Roman numeral 5, discussion items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the city council to vote on that item. Number A, resident-owned mobile home communities. This is informational session by Victoria Bannon, ROC Northwest, regarding a resident cooperative program for mobile home park residents. Victoria, if you'd please introduce yourself to the council, and then you have microphones in the ceiling above your head, yeah?
Fantastic.
But you just have to remember to kind of raise your voice and project a little bit so those listening at home can hear what you have to say. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much. I'm perfectly fine projecting. So my name is Victoria O'Banion. I manage the marketing and acquisitions for the ROC, Resident-Owned Communities Program. We are a program out of Northwest Cooperative Development Center out of Olympia. And we serve all of Washington State and North Idaho with this Resident-Owned Communities Program. This is a program where residents in manufactured housing communities form a limited equity housing cooperative and purchase their communities that they live in. This is done through a systematic process. There are over 300 resident-owned communities across the country, and there is actually 2 in South Idaho. And then there's 24 in Washington and 23 in Oregon, and there's some in Montana as well. I come to you today coming from a conversation about Flying V, which is a community that is on the south side. Yeah, south side of the city. That community came across my desk as a potential for resident acquisition. At that time, this was several months ago, we actually did put the park under contract, and part of our process is to then go talk with the residents. We, Rock Northwest, Northwest Cooperative Development Center, do not own any properties. The residents purchase the properties. So once we get the property under contract, we have a conversation with the residents. Unfortunately for Flying V, the residents were not interested in proceeding and moving forward with resident acquisition, so we did have to rescind that contract. Had the residents chosen to move forward with forming a housing cooperative, a limited equity housing cooperative, we would have worked with them to establish the cooperative and then take assignment of the contract. From there, then we work with the residents to, it's a dual track, like 90-day period. We work with the residents to form their housing cooperative. We have a 3-inch thick binder of templates and documents for them to adopt and incorporate for their community, bylaws, community rules, policies, and procedures on how to operate a business. While we're doing that, we're simultaneously doing the real estate development side of the house. So we're doing the due diligence on the park, we're looking at all of the systems that are going through it, and then we're helping the resident cooperative secure financing. We have access to national financing that provides funding and a loan at over 100% of the purchase price. They provide funding at over 100% of the purchase price for 3 reasons. 1, it costs money to purchase, so all of those inspections are then paid at closing. 2, we put money in reserve accounts. So there are 2 main reserve accounts that are funded at acquisition and closing. One is the capital improvement budget. So there's money put aside for capital improvements. There's money and those are identified during the due diligence process. There's also money put aside for operating expenses. So 2 months worth of operating expenses are set in a reserve account. And I lied, I'm sorry, there is 3 reserve accounts. The 3rd reserve account is 2 months worth of mortgage payments that are set aside. And those reserve accounts are managed by the funder. So it costs money to buy something. We put money in the reserve account, and at the same time, the residents don't put equity into the purchase. We know that residents living in manufactured housing communities would not have the financial means to be able to collectively gather 20 or 30% down of the purchase. So we finance at over 100% of the purchase price for those 3 reasons. At closing, the resident cooperative closes, they purchase the parcel, and with a secured loan from the funder. After closing, we stay with that resident group for a minimum of 10 years. We do not expect them to be able to own and operate a manufactured housing community. It's kind of a niche business. So we have experience. We've been doing this since 2008, and our national organization has been in existence for over 30 years. So we have experience in how to deal with catastrophes and situations that will come up. And if we don't personally have that experience, we tap our national network who does have experience. So we provide technical assistance to the board of directors. We come and we help them read their financials. We also provide training. The national office of Rock USA provides training, as well as our local office regionally. So that is the Rock model. That's our Rock program. I originally came to talk to you guys about Flying V. Unfortunately, those residents did not choose to move forward. Manufactured housing is a very interesting segment of housing. The residents, for the most part, own their homes, but rent the land that their homes are sit on. So it's very complex. Are they owners? Are they renters? It depends on who you ask, and it depends on what agency you're talking to, whether they're owners or renters. They're also extremely vulnerable. This is their greatest asset. And while sometimes it doesn't look the best, and I totally understand that sometimes manufactured housing communities can be an eyesore, the reality is that is their greatest asset, and park owners know that, and park owners tend to take advantage of that situation. There are classes that park owners participate in that literally says that you can pull every penny out of these residents that you can, because they're not going to leave. They are stuck there. So with that, I conclude, and I welcome any questions about manufactured housing, our program and our model.
Thank you, Victoria. A lot of information, or good information too.
A lot.
Counselor Spickelmeyer, we'll start over here. then come across.
So I guess if the residents had, wanted to move forward, what would your question or action have been to the council?
Yeah, really just to inform you of the process, but this, I would have had residents and a face to the model that is here. This is a new model in Idaho. It's needed and, there's a lot of, big investors that are coming into Idaho now and, taking advantage of these residents. So my presentation would have been the same. I just would have had residents and had a real life story that I could walk you through.
Counselor Towsley.
Yeah, I really appreciate this new resource for people who are living in mobile home parks. A couple of months ago, I was working with a woman who was lives in a mobile home park. An out-of-state group had purchased their park, and they were going to be raising rent an astronomical amount. And the problem that we have for many people is that because they have older mobile homes, they can move it if they have a private piece of property to put it on, but they can't move it into another mobile home park because they no longer meet the codes of the newer parks. So they're between a rock and a hard place. And those landowners do know that. I know this for a fact. And so I guess the question I have for you after saying all that is, why were the people from Flying Bee reluctant to join with your organization? What's your sense of it? I mean,
So I think that the sense of urgency was not present for the residents of Flying V. The reality is that a cooperative is not for everyone. You're forming a business with your neighbors. And if you have doubts about your neighbor's ability or cognitive ability or concerns, then you probably don't want to be in business with your neighbor. So I think that was the situation that was happening at Flying V. That, to be transparent, that's only the second time that this has happened in my 2.5 years of running the program and model. The other time it was a community of 10 people, and there was a lot of racial tension in that community. So most of the time, 99% of the time, the residents do form a cooperative and take assignment of the contract. So yeah, it's unfortunate for Flying Bee, but hopefully there's other communities in the Lewiston area that will, the owners will come to us to sell their property.
Counselor Towsley.
is there anything that would exclude a mobile home park from being able to utilize your services?
Communities that are less than 25 are really hard. It's hard because you're financially dependent on everybody. So the residents continue to pay a fee. They continue to pay a lot rent. And their lot rent is simply their mortgage plus operating expenses divided by the number of units in the park. And so if you have less than 25, that's a significant impact. If somebody is unable to pay rent for whatever reason, then it impacts the financials deeply. So that's really the only deterrent. Outside of that, then no, we work with everything.
Well, I'll ask a quick question. Can you just give a 30-second description of a limited equity corporation or whatever you called it?
I can. So a limited equity housing cooperative is a cooperative where the residents become members of the business, the cooperative business. The limited equity is simply because the residents are putting a very limited equity, usually $100 to $200, into the formation and the expenses of the cooperative. When they leave the park, there's nothing saying that they can't move out of the park whenever they want to and sell their home. When they leave, they're not going to gain equity from the land itself, like the equity that land increases. They're not going to gain a portion of that. The only thing that they're going to get back from the cooperative is the $200 that they put in. That's limited. You could have a market rate cooperative where they would have actually gained a portion of the increased value of the land. But because the residents are putting in such a limited amount of equity, it's not. If it was market rate, they would be putting in the 20-30% down payment.
So the increased value stays with the cooperative.
The increased value stays with the cooperative, and that's where this provides permanent affordable housing. It really stops and levels off the rise in rent for those residents. We know that manufactured housing communities raise rent, investor-owned communities raise rent significantly more than ones that are resident-owned. Resident-owned communities raise rent less than 1% annually.
Councilors, any last questions before we let Victoria go? Thank you for being here today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very informative, thank you. Okay, council, next up, we'll take item 5B, Community Park Public Outreach. Overview of the work performed by Clearwater Financial related to public engagement for the Community Park project. That includes the open events, surveys, and meetings with community stakeholders. This is identified as an action item. Again, it does not require you to vote on that item. We have Director Barker with us here today to present to us, and I think we have somebody maybe from Clearwater Financial here with us today, but I'll let Director Barker introduce our guests as well. Director Barker, welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for having us on the agenda today. Tim Barker, Parks and Recreation Director for the city. With me via Zoom today is Cameron Ariel. He will be doing the bulk amount of the presentation. Just wanted to be able to get Cameron and myself in front of you to answer some questions, but also to have Cameron talk about the process that we've been going through with our partnership with Clearwater Financial. So Cameron does have a slide presentation, so hopefully he can be able to share his screen to run through that with you, and then we'll be definitely open for questions once he is done.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Mayor, council members. It's a pleasure to be with you. Can you hear me okay?
Might have to speak up just a little bit, Cameron, and introduce yourself for the record, please.
A little bit louder. Cameron Ariel with Clearwater Financial, the consultant for the public engagement portion for Community Park, and a pleasure to be with you all this evening. So wanted to just get in front of you all at this stage in the process, kind of give you a quick update of our activities, how we've been engaging the community, and give you a quick report on those efforts, and then get you some information, at least up to date, and seek some feedback from you as well on potential next steps. So I'm just going to dive right in here, and we'll go from there. So, as you know, this has been a very extended process to start the process of community that we know as currently a community park, and how that's gone back a ways in the acquisition of the property, the partnerships that have gone into getting it to where it is to date. And then now here we are getting to the public engagement portion of that, and potential next steps going forward. As you'll note, when we were first engaged to do this work on behalf of the community, we really wanted to just see where things were at, what were people's sentiments, what was going on, and to also make sure that we're getting good information out to the community so that they could provide informed feedback. So based on that, we wanted to report back and let you know where we are. Just a quick snapshot of the work to date. A lot of things have been going on. We've had over 17 interviews to date with stakeholders, folks that use the park, which would benefit from the park, have been partnered with the park in the past, folks in the business arena, economic development arena, so on and so forth. Also other partners within the municipal governments, and certainly interested citizens, and sports leagues, things of that nature. So passed along the summary of those interviews to you all. Hopefully that was informative and gave you some good in-depth detail for consideration. We did form a citizens committee, which is made up of approximately 15 individuals. Again, a good cross-section of the community to participate in this process, make sure that they are hyper-informed, as well as utilizing their networks to distribute information to, again, educate and engage the community. We've had 2 meetings to date, and still rolling strong there. There was a video that was produced. Hopefully you were all able to see that. Here's the link to that. And here's kind of just that first clip of Tim there that just gives the community a good, quick update on the park as well, to get hopefully everybody quickly and succinctly up to speed on the efforts there. We did produce a survey as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail as kind of the meat of this presentation, but wanted to make sure that, again, we can continue to encourage people to participate in that survey as we look to keep that open through the remainder of this month, to again, inform, but also seek feedback via the survey. A lot of data analysis and mapping has been done. As you know, there is the Lewiston Community Park website, which JUB, the engineer on the project, maintains, but a lot of good information and updates have been done there. So again, encourage the community to go there and seek information. Obviously, the plan is uploaded there. There's great interactive tools where people can view the park and different amenities, so on and so forth, and 360 view. You can take the survey there, links to the survey and video, other things. So a great resource in educational opportunity there. A lot of social media outreach, updates on the park, pushing information that way, as well as the survey, so on and so forth. Good interaction there. Community events, so there's been a few of those. The main one just here recently, where there was again, led by Tim and the Parks and Rec Department, and as well as JUB, but interested parties had booths there. Folks were able to walk the park, see it firsthand, and kind of get answers to their questions answered there in person. And then, of course, meetings like this. So with that, I'm going to skip over to the results of the survey to date, and just again, make note of that is what we're looking at here, is just we are going to keep this open, but wanted to just give you a quick snapshot of those results. Let me just pull that up here and then share that. Okay, can you guys see that okay? All right. So you can see that the survey has been open since July 2nd. That's when we first opened it. And it's we took these results as of Friday. We did have 609 respondents, so good response rate so far. But it is important to note that we did see the majority of responses coming in towards the end of the month, as the survey was included in the utility billing mailing. So as folks receive that, we've seen a significant spike in response rate. Thought it would be good just to give a quick recap of the demographic of the participants. So good to see that obviously a lot of people from Lewiston interested in the survey. And we're seeing that, overwhelmingly, those are folks that have lived in the area for quite a while. So good things there. Pretty good distribution there in gender. One thing we want to just kind of put out there as far as context goes, we are seeing essentially an overrepresentation in the sample of the 50 and older demographic. Not too surprising where that's coming through largely through the utility billing, but it is important to note that in the responses that we are seeing that. And then obviously in the lower demographics, we'll talk a little bit more about that as to how we can engage that segment of the community as well. And then just to kind of a deeper note on that, the reason why that's we would say that's an overrepresentation is just the comparison between the response rates and then the population distribution according to the census. So where we have the largest population of folks in Lewiston is actually 0 to 19. So essentially not the voting population, and where we're not seeing really any participation at all. And then, of course, where we're seeing a large participation in the results. So just to note that as background, and we'll talk a little bit about future steps there with that. So diving into the actual survey, you can see here this question was meant to do two things. One was to inform the population of essentially the breadth of services that the Parks and Rec Department does, and then also to secondarily seek their feedback on how they would prioritize those services. And you see that pretty much overwhelmingly folks value parks and open spaces, and then right on the heels of that is pathways, recreational programming. And then you can kind of see, if we kind of look at it a little bit deeper, what certain age demographics value differs. And then, of course, by the length of residency, you do see some breakout there. But again, this is indicative that people do value those things that the Parks and Rec Department does. We then just asked a series of just quick test questions on, generally speaking, right out of the gate, what are your thoughts on parks and where do you value them and open spaces? Again, you can see here that the community does really value the parks, see them as very important. And then on down to regional tournaments and community events, you see that ebb a little bit. And it's important to kind of note there again just how that breaks out from an age demographic. You see that that goes up when you have a younger crowd, and is at lowest in that 50 to 64 age demographic. When we asked some historical and demographic questions about how Community Park came about, so for example, when the property was purchased with a grant, so on and so forth. These tend to be, tend to have fairly limited impact on how people view Community Park. Good information to get out to people so they can understand the history, but anything below a 2 would indicate they're not quite sure what, or that doesn't change their support more or less of Community Park. Then when we talk about economic impact of Community Park, we see some kind of varying information. The two that kind of stood out was the fact that the city has planned for and has cash potentially to pledge towards Community Park, and that also businesses and others would participate in funding Community Park and the overall impact of the of that would lower the burden on citizens. You do see that goes into that would move the needle as far as their support, as well as the city and funding a portion of it, and that would potentially not require a tax increase. Those two in particular, you see, did move the needle in the support of the park. Would mention here too, the one that received the lowest was when this full burden of community park, or at least phase one, was put on the taxpayer in the form of a cost per year. That received the least support from the sample respondents. Then we got into the idea of funding opportunities, funding mechanisms. I think this is a really good one, and we did get some good personal feedback from the community event about this. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But what you can see here is that somewhat overwhelmingly, people supported the funding of the park through grants and sponsorships and donations. The thing to note with this is that those are really not a way to fund the park. It's just it would be a way to maybe fund a portion if we're lucky, but certainly something to explore. And so that may be worth some additional education to the community as to what the limitations on those types of funding opportunities are. Certainly something to be explored. You also see some pretty good support of an auditorium district. We'll definitely talk about that a little more because there's some great follow-up on that, as well as impact fees. We'll talk about that as well. But you do see the idea of a general obligation bond received the least support. So we'll definitely want to talk about that. Somewhat surprising that auditorium districts and impact fees received the response they did, given that they don't represent a property tax increase, where auditorium district is largely paid from visitors, paying additional fees on their hotel, motel stays, as well as impact fees, basically the idea of growth paying for growth, and that not being borne by the existing tax base. So, again, we'll talk about this in greater detail, but some education in that regard may be useful for the community. When we did ask, if they did select unsupportive or very unsupportive for an auditorium district, we asked a little bit deeper question on, well, why would they not be interested in that? And we found that the overwhelming response there was that they need additional information on it. They don't know enough. And so I think that that is something worthwhile. We did find that those that were supportive or very supportive of an auditorium district, we were able to actually collect quite a few names of folks that were interested in actually signing a petition to get that rolling. So that is noteworthy for the mayor council to consider in that discussion. But again, definitely a gap in an awareness and understanding of what an auditorium district is and how that funding mechanism would work. A little bit deeper on impact fees, you can kind of see that breakout. One of the reasons, and then we did ask the question just outright, if folks would be supportive of moving forward with the bond resolution to move forward on the November ballot. You can see there that the overwhelming was very unlikely to support that. So important to note that at this time. And then what you do see when we asked a little bit deeper as to why they were either unlikely or very unlikely, that overwhelmingly it was the tax implication. They don't want to see additional property taxes. And then also that, akin to that was that there are other priorities facing the city. So not too surprising, but it's important to note the results of this as we go forward. We did allow the opportunity for some qualitative response. We saw fairly overwhelmingly the commentary about taxation and then other priorities. You can see here kind of particularly the infrastructure needs. In that order, roads and streets were mentioned, water, and in particular the reservoir, sewer, wastewater, and then stormwater, and then other needs that were mentioned as well. So wanted to make sure that you guys saw some of that qualitative response as well. That was a little was unsolicited but freely given. And then basically from this, again, we're just a month into the survey. We still have some time left to collect data, but we wanted to kind of give at least some takeaways from this and potentially solicit some feedback from you all as well. But again, largely parks open space ranked very highly among the respondents, and those that were in the 65 plus and longer demographic profiles, as well as nature reserves ranked highly in the younger crowds. You also see residents that were 19 and under represent the largest population segment in the city, but we haven't quite gotten the response from them. And then that we did get quite a bit of response from the 50 and up demographic. We strongly consider all of you to, if you haven't yet, take the survey yourselves, but then certainly push this out to your networks. We do want to get as much education as well as engagement via the survey. Still see that as being very important, but in particular those younger demographics where we're underrepresented. We do see very limited support for a bond at this time, particularly when we weigh taxes and other potential priorities. And I think that there was that feeling so far that there are needs that need to be prioritized there. One thing, kind of along that note, I would just say that that's certainly something that may be worthwhile for the mayor council to consider as a process to prioritize those items, and then engage the public in that to help in that prioritization, and then seek, based on that prioritization, how to fund those needs going forward, so that the community can feel like those needs are being heard, and then there's a plan to meet them. And then skipping back just a bit here with the auditorium district and impact fees, really do see, based on the results thus far, that there is an information gap there between those that understand it, those that don't. And in particular, the idea that it would not require a tax increase on the existing tax base. So with that, I'll just kind of pause there. We did have a couple things that I wanted to make sure we got out and on the record. Let me just get back here. Hopefully I can do this pretty seamlessly. Let's see. Okay. So wanted to get back to this just quickly. Wanted to put this up on the screen. This is something that we really feel is important to get out to the community, even in this setting. It's just the visual of this funding matrix that kind of gives further detail of how each of these funding mechanisms work, so that the community can start to potentially digest these as means to fulfilling the needs that exist. I'd kind of point, just beyond the description a little bit, but just the idea that how long it would take for a certain funding tool to actually fully fund, community park. So for example, grants, if you look here, it's just that's not likely to fund the full project ever. So, needing to consider that, as well as savings, the idea that that would take a long time to save up and then pay for all of it. Granted, it could be, we've talked about this before with the council, but the idea that it ultimately would be a combination of these things. There's additional detail here about an auditorium district and the process for establishing one, and then also establishing the fee for that. And then, of course, impact fees as well. So just information that could be really useful to the public. And then lastly, just wanted to highlight again the economic impacts. This was from the FCS report done last year on the projection of benefit, economic benefit that would be generated from community park. Again, the idea that this isn't just a community park, a neighborhood park. It's very much an economic hub and a potential boon to the local economy. So wanting to make sure that information is on the record as well. But Mr. Mayor, members of council, happy to talk about anything else that we're seeing thus far, or any other feedback as we look to next steps on where we go from here. So I'll pause there.
Thank you, Cameron and Director Barker. Council, questions? Councilor Forsman?
Feel weird talking into the, like, I'm gonna stare at the podium anyway. When we put out the survey, do we also consider those that don't get their bills on paper but only digital?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, yes, we did. The thought here is that we did a physical, as well as we did do a social media push for this as well. And we look to continue to push the survey clear through the end of the month because we do want to see the numbers be more representative. But yeah, we did do QR code, we did do hard URL, and then of course we did mail, as well as a digital push for this information. Try to be multimedia in nature.
Thank you, Cameron. Councilors? Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. This might be for the director. I'm curious on the Stady Park update, the listing of years, what the construction of the basketball and fitness area is for 2023.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Tim Barker, Parks and Rec Director. So that's a project that has been previously approved that we need to move forward with. This last year, we purchased the equipment for the outdoor fitness area and the basketball court. So we need to finish up the design process for that area. It's adjacent to where I think it's about 60 parking stall lot, our prefabricated restroom that's in there right near the new reservoir. So we need to finish that design process and then bid that out for construction. But that project had been approved in the budget.
Councilor Lidke?
Can I follow up? So I think part of that question is, will we have a completion date anytime
We
soon?
have to speak up, Councilor.
A completion date anytime soon on that particular part of the project?
We'll have a completion date once we have a contract in place and a contractor picked out. So it hasn't gone to bidding yet. So we won't have a completion until we put that out for bid and then negotiate that with the contractor. I would like to tell you November before winter hits. But it could be a spring completion.
Mr. Mayor?
Counselor Towesley?
Thank you. I did some traveling in June, and every night that I stayed somewhere, I know that part of the fee that I paid to stay in that place went to cover the kinds of things that people who come to a city should be paying for. And so I think for this to really gain any traction, we have to really have a good conversation with our constituents about auditorium district and fees for that would help us with this large project. And I'm seeing the numbers, I'm looking at what people are thinking. And I too agree that there needs to be more information generated about why this is important and that it would not be affecting citizens of Lewiston. But it would certainly help us. I mean, not having a fee that we can apply for, help me out, Mr. Mayor, with the local option taxes that because we're not a resort community, that kind of hamstrings us. So if this is something that could in fact help us, I think it's certainly something to be looked at. So, thank you.
Director Barker?
I can just briefly comment on that. That's definitely something we found out. We initially went into the surveying, and some of the information may change as we complete the surveying. But really what we found out, what Cameron alluded to, was there's probably more support for an auditorium district, but there just isn't the education. And so when we were initially talking about a bond or something going in this November's ballot, you know, we looked at the bond first and then thought, well, maybe we should go for an auditorium district. And from the responses, we're learning probably what happened about 16 years ago when the chamber led an auditorium district process. We need to make sure we have identified projects. I don't think that was noted at that point. They didn't receive enough signatures to get it on the ballot. And so really that public education is what we're gonna have to get after. And so if we were today to decide to move forward with a auditorium district to be on the ballot, that education process would have to really fast track, and I don't think we're comfortable doing that. But looking at a longer term education so then people really understand the value of what that would be able to bring to this. The particular projects that it would identify, and then that's governed by a different organization that manages both the assets and the budgets of those amenities within the park.
Counselor Forsman?
I don't know if my question was answered earlier about the, those who by mail. They get, some of them, I guess, get them by email. So we're gonna send this QR through the email or something so that they are equally getting it. And sorry if I didn't hear that. As well as knowing how to use a QR code. I got some feedback saying that some didn't even know how to use it. So I didn't know whether having an explanation below it maybe would have helped. So those are kind of some things that have been brought up from the public.
So I'll admit, I usually don't look at my digital version of my utility bill until right before it gets auto-paid from my account. But I did go in today to look and see if it was on there, and I didn't see it on my email. And so that's something that we'll look at trying to address. But Cameron alluded to the fact that we look at multiple ways. We need to address it obviously more than utility bill. Obviously, we saw a good response. And we know who is receiving the hard copies in the mail. So that's what the survey's shown us today, but we do need to address and look at those individuals that do receive the email version. But like I said, I didn't see that it was on my email as an option to look at. So that will be something that we'll look at over this next month as one of the many other areas that we're gonna be looking at getting the word out through.
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. I am also very in support of an auditorium district, and we should be doing it, and we need to educate because it's a great tool. Going back to your response on the basketball and fitness things that are scheduled for this year, is there a reason why we haven't gotten a contractor yet?
It's partly me because of other projects that I've had going on, partly watching the market. We did have identified that we wanted to do a post-tension concrete surface for the basketball court, which it lasts longer, but it's more expensive. Availability right now of contractors, they're still catching up from a couple years ago. So it's been a combination of a few of those things. I, more than anybody, would love to see us have a win and have those two amenities installed because we do have the equipment to be able to move forward. So that's,
Yeah, I do understand the supply of contractors. I just didn't know if there was a reason why we hadn't gone after it sooner. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Lidkey?
I have a couple more questions. And I appreciate that there's a timeline on here. I would really like to see associated with that timeline the amount of city dollars that were spent each year to kind of show the public what's been invested and help us make decisions when, you know, Mr. Ariel's comment about us needing to prioritize, well, I think that's the biggest mountain we have to climb right now. And I do have a bit of concern on some of the statements in the report as far as, you know, we did approve the plan, but I don't know that the statement of saying this park will move forward under this, I mean, obviously there's delays even with money that we already approved due to the fact that it was put into a budget and approved previously. But my big question is when we talk about the city building fund revenue bond, when we talk about zero tax increase, I think that's obviously a true statement, but it's not a clear picture of what that entails, because that $1.6 million is not an increase to tax, but it is still tax dollars. And I think the message I'm hearing is that people really need relief. And when we talk about prioritization, I see that $1.6 million either being fully transferred into a fund that prioritizes towards those roads. And I mean, I appreciated that list of priorities. I think that's what we're hearing from the general public. But when we put out those messages of, you know, zero tax increase, I think people are starting to really pay attention and understand that that's great, we're not taking more, but they are being taxed more over because of valuations and different, not a very good spread of tax dollars. And so again, auditorium is great, but what are we doing in the last 20 years when we talk about, I read that there's, you know I've brought up the question of where's the foundation, but when I read that there's businesses out there ready to support this, if we've been spending money on this, has there always been support, or is this newfound support? And can we hear from those businesses? Because I think that is also a feature that the public needs to know, that, hey, we have some support coming as well that would cause some relief to the overall ticket price. But I'm not, it's hard to have that conversation when there's not that data in front of us. So is there a way that we can know that?
right, so I'll attack, let's see, were there 12 or 13 parts to that one?
There's more to here that I'll email you.
So I'll just briefly address the assigned building fund, and Amy can definitely, and later on the agenda, provide a little more commentary beside what I can now. But that was set up for certain use, for funding, so we can't necessarily just take it and use it elsewhere. I believe council has to make that decision on their own if they choose to utilize it elsewhere, but it was set up for specific uses. Essentially, the fire station and community park were the two major projects that it was initially set up to address. So digging into what the assigned buildings definition is, I think would be important for council to understand. As far as a decision being made about this project, and that's something I think too that we've learned through the public education process, is that we need to remind or let the community know that council in 2004 made the decision to utilize federal funds to purchase the property that locked them into 150 of the 187 acres to be outdoor recreation in perpetuity. So we're bound by federal funds to develop at least 150 of those acres for outdoor recreation. Yes, we've spent almost 13 million to date on progress over those 20 years and amenities, pathways, infrastructure at that site. But realistically, there's still not a lot of usable space at this point. So that's something, again, that we'll have to, through this process, identify with the community is, again, looking at these funding sources, do we want to go towards a long-term development, which is obviously going to cost us more, but is that easier to palate for the public than it would be for a bond for half or bond, a $45 million bond up front and then a secondary bond afterwards to complete the development? So those are items that, again, education we're going to have to get out there on. My understanding from the way the Land and Water Conservation Fund grants are written is you can't really get out of a grant. You can reallocate that land elsewhere, but now we have a reallocation from Airport Park that happened in 2004 and the new land that was dedicated at that time when we purchased the property. So we have 150 acres that is dedicated in one location, and we're not going to be able to reallocate that anywhere else, as far as I'm aware, unless we piecemeal it in different areas. And it has to be towards land, acquisition of land, or a new development. We can't necessarily tie it to something that's already been developed, so. I sort of answered a couple of yours. Was there something else that you wanted me to key in on there?
I think if there's businesses that are willing to speak to the council, and then I'll add one more, because it would be nice to know who's on the citizen committee. I think the public would like to know so that they can be involved in this and people can reach out to them as well. I think the citizen committee is a great idea, but this was the first, maybe I've paid attention, but knowing who those people are would be great.
Sure. Yeah, and we do have additional videos that are in the finalization stages that Cameron's been working on that's interviewing community members, business members. So those will be things that we'll be rolling out. And we'd be more than happy to share with at least the council or whoever you want it to be shared with, those members, or we'll list it on our, whether it's the community park website or the Parks and Rec website. It's a cross-section of members within our community, both businesses, nonprofits. So it's about, I think, Cameron, you can correct me, I think we're about 20-member committee.
Yeah, I was just gonna pull it up and share it with everybody. Let me see if I can try to make some of the contact information and what have you limit that here. But yeah, we can definitely share that with the council so that you know who's involved in that. Let me see here. Just share the screens here real quickly.
And as he's looking for that, I will say that our meetings aren't all rainbows and unicorns. There's a lot of people in the room that are very in tune with the feeling of what the community is facing right now. So that is something that we've definitely had some deep conversations on. So it's not like we've got a room full of people that are 100% gung-ho on this project. So we wanted to have that realistic understanding when we're creating the survey and getting information out to the public.
Yes. All right. Can you see that there? So this is the group here. Hopefully just gonna scroll through here. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully you could see that okay. Yeah, looks like we have, I'd say 25 invited and probably active to about 20 or so. But really good feedback. They've been really informative about distribution, about the concepts, about the needs. You know, and we did capture quite a few of their interviews as well. That was a part of the summary for you all. So good people and good cross section of the community.
So Tim, you're gonna get the council, the list of the members?
Sure. Yeah, and I can clean this up so it's a little easier to read. I'll just do it in a Word document probably.
Yeah, we can certainly get that too. You bet.
Councilor Spicklemeyer?
Mr. Mayor, I guess my concern or question is that, and I know I'm gonna get the feedback on emails, is that if people watch this, it shows that the majority of the survey do not support it at all, right? So how long does the survey and this education process go? I keep hearing, well, we need to educate them more. I guess educate to hope we get more votes for it, or, you know, where are we gonna go? When is the end of this survey process?
So, good question.
Yeah.
Cameron, you can answer it if you want to.
Yep, sure. Just some thoughts. Really appreciate that question because the intent here isn't to you know, prolong you know, the magic, so to speak. Really, we're just trying to get information and have it be representative, and then based on that feedback, hopefully inform you all on some productive ways to move forward. Again, based on what we're seeing, I don't think the at least the conceptualized path makes some sense. You know, at this point, you know, going forward with a bond in November, I don't think makes sense. I think what we're hearing here is pretty clear and would be, you know, the council would be wise to hear that from the community. We are also hearing in a productive way that prioritization from the city is needed on needs and potentially how what is the plan to address those needs. It's not so much a negative feedback, so to speak, on community park. It's just where does it fit in the prioritization and long-term planning of the community, and what is the city's plan to address it? So those are maybe some constructive ways to channel this, and then based on like we mentioned, particularly with auditorium districts and impact fees, there's certainly a segment of the population that has said as much, that they just don't understand them. So where that doesn't represent a property tax increase, you know, in our view, additional education of the community in that regard makes a lot of sense, and could be a great funding tool to meet the various needs, in particular the community park need of the community. But hopefully that helps. Want to use this data to help you all make good decisions going forward.
So just a comment I've got related to the education piece is, obviously, we're looking at the closing this survey at the end of this month. But to me, the education needs to be ongoing, but we'll find out what particular areas we need to focus on. And if that's alternative funding sources, which seems to be a lot of the interest, if there is interest. You know, something that we've gained is the community so far would much prefer, instead of going for a property tax increase, for us to identify some long-term funding sources to help assist. That may eventually change some of their opinions, some of them, not all, but it could definitely contribute to that. And so looking at that, but also knowing that the, education about the project and some of the specific amenities within it has to continue, as this is a site that we need to develop. Again, committed in 2004 to this project.
Counselor Lidgate?
Again, I think prioritization is probably our number one, role as council, being the fiduciary stewards of the city's money, we need to do that. I would just, again though, with prioritization, I put into staff efforts, and time spent, and when we talk about auditorium and impact fees and those alternate, funding sources, to me, that's an avenue for our identified partners in our strategic plan to get involved and really push that effort so that the city's staff can focus on the needs that we currently have. I think that's the other elephant in the room for me is that we have valuable assets already in Parks and Rec through our facilities and our green space that are beautiful places. I walk the levee every morning and I enjoy Kiwanis. Where I work, we rent out parks on occasion and sometimes facilities. To me, the prioritization is where are we at, and really if we have that amount of support from these stakeholders, then can they come forward and say, we'll help with that? Because when we talk about for the city to go out and educate, is that a good use of our time? And I don't know that it's necessarily education. I mean, obviously people you don't go to school in 7th grade and learn about what an auditorium district is, but it is just allowing them the information and making it more viable and doing it in a more regular way. When you have places like the Chamber and Valley Vision and economic development groups that are wanting not only support from their communities, but from us financially, I think that is something that we need to look to say, this is how you can help us. And that takes some stress off of your department to focus on, the projects that are taking a lot of time. So just a comment that I do think this is a call to action for all of our partners and our stakeholders that truly want this to be successful. And I am one of those people. I would love to see a park completed. 150 acres sounds a little much. And I do want to ask one more question. When we talk about 238 permanent jobs, how many of those are going to be city? Because that is an ongoing cost to the taxpayer as well.
So if memory serves me correctly, are you talking about as far as once the site's fully developed, how many positions would the city have at the site?
Yeah.
I believe we were talking about 4 or 5 maintenance and 1 recreation, like a rec coordinator position. And that's part of the 1.6 million operating expense that was in the study as well.
And Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman, directly to your question, the 238 direct new jobs is not inclusive of city employees. That's new economy in the Lewiston community.
Okay, thank you, Cameron, for being with us today, and Director Barker, it looks like we've answered most of the questions for today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Really appreciated the feedback. Certainly, if there's anything else, that we need to take away, by all means, reach out to us, to Tim, and whatever other information you need or we should be looking to gain from the community, we can certainly look forward to that as well. So, we'll be in touch with you all. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you.
Take care. See ya.
Okay, councilors, next we have item C under Roman numeral 5, discussion items. Undeveloped city properties. This is discussion led by Councilor Forsman regarding potential uses of undeveloped city properties. Counselor Forsman, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. So you have some handouts there so that we have some visuals on properties that were being discussed. And I have some notes so I can try to keep on track here. So I don't know how, it seems like the best thing we could do is just kind of go down the line. What I have here is Fifth and Brighton, so I don't know if anybody has, if we're planning on keeping that, or what's our thoughts on that? And just kind of,
So our packets aren't in order of where you're going.
no, sorry, I didn't make the order. We can go in order. You wanna talk about the cemetery first?
Well, it's just, then we can just turn the
Easier.
page and
Okay.
know which one.
Yeah, let's go. Cemetery, I know I talked to Tim a little bit about that, and not just that property, but even maybe selling the cemetery to a private entity and not managing it anymore as a city. Some cities do that. And maybe we would benefit from having the Urban Forestry Group come and show us some reasons why keeping it is beneficial for the citizens and keeping it on the taxpayer roll, but that's kind of where I'll lead off and then see what you guys are.
Counselor, you're running the floor, so.
Well, I mean, I have all my opinions, but it's a discussion, so
All right.
what everybody else feels about it too,
I'll let
so.
folks, here, give Counselor Forsman the gavel, she can run the meeting.
So,
You can call on whoever you'd like, Counselor
Okay.
Shores.
Hannah,
so when we talk about privatizing, what is the extent
You
of
gotta
that?
speak up louder, folks.
What is the extent of that conversation? Is there interested parties? Are we just drawing at ideas on a chalkboard? Where are we at with that conversation?
that was drawing ideas on the chalkboard. I don't believe we have any interested parties. It was just more of added discussion that if we feel we can eliminate or benefit from having.
Follow up.
Okay.
Isn't part of this particular property, I believe this kind of top half being used by the city is miscellaneous use? I'm not really sure what you'd call it, but there's piles of dirt, some timber.
I am not aware of any being used, but I can.
I think it's their storage area for, is that
Bicklemeier, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Please tell us.
Enlighten.
Mayor, City Council, Tim Barker, Parks and Rec Director. So what's, the top section of the undeveloped area right now is utilized for multiple sources. One is just general dirt that we're utilizing both for the removal of and putting in place any burials. So that's a portion of it. Streets uses some of it for street sweepings because of the location with their routes. It's just an easy spot for them to come in. So you'll see like grindings from street sweepings will be in there, but then also if they throw rock down during the winter, when the sweepers come through, once the snow's gone, they'll come and then place it over in that area too. So there's a number of different stockpiles. Both on-site, when we are going through pruning, we'll have limbs there. Our chipper is typically located at that spot. And so we'll come through, or when the red shirts are here, we'll have the red shirts do the chipping for us. And so then now we have lovely bark piles. And then the bark is utilized back in our park system and Modi Park. So there's various piles that are stockpiled there at this time for utilization. When we look forward towards if we were to develop it for cemetery development in the future, obviously we'd have to identify or relocate some of those sources elsewhere because it is very useful to have that space there. With the water line replacement that's gone through Normal Hill as well, that's kind of a spot too that construction debris left to try to reduce the cost to the city for those contracts coming through and then end up getting put, whether it goes to Brighton Canyon or another location, ends up there, but that's another use for that site.
Just quickly,
Hannah.
how do our neighbors feel about that? Do we have any complaints about the use of that area for, I mean, I'm hearing dust at least, probably some noise. Has that been an issue, or do we need?
Yes, and I think some of the discussion too has been as if we can continue to turn some of those piles so we don't have weeds and other things growing on them. They're better with that. I think not to speak for Public Works, but I think one of the biggest concerns is probably the street sweeping area that has some moisture in it, and it being a little smelly during the summer months. But otherwise, I do work regularly with all of those neighbors. If they have an issue or concern, they know to contact me directly, and then I work with them to try to resolve those issues. And whether that's our maintenance along the edges of our property or certain types of debris that we've been put there.
I think another thing too, on this is I'm on the commission, the Seminary Commission, and I think it'd be beneficial, as sure Ms. Phillips commented, if we had them come in and talk to us, and maybe the, I guess you'd call him the foreman that takes care of, he has some good information on that area, and the commission has some projections of the use of it and things like that. I think that'd help a lot with the decisions on that property.
Thank you.
Schroeder.
We know we're all gonna die. But we also know they don't make any more land. So to me, if there is land that is adjacent to a place that we are using and growing because we don't live forever, then I think that we should have the foresight to keep that in perpetuity, if that's the correct word, so that we have access to that growth, to keep generating itself. And I think it's not, doesn't make common sense to get rid of something that is right there that can be utilized as it grows, which we know it's going to, whether it's cremations or burials or whatever form of it. So I'm not in favor of utilizing it otherwise, except for what they're doing currently, as it needs, you know, done.
Director Barker, are we making a profit off of the cemetery right now?
No, the cemetery is currently subsidized by the general fund.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, our perpetual care fund would be at a point, kind of almost like where, you know, the police retirement fund, at a point that it's earning enough to be able to offset those expenses.
And is our aim to create a profit off of the cemetery?
Not to make a profit,
Thank
but
you.
for it to pay itself.
Yeah, thank you. The idea of talking about privatization of something like this means when you privatize, that means somebody is there to make a profit. And I can't support that in any way. I want that to get off the table right now. Because this is a service that the city of Lewiston provides. We have untold generations of people who have been buried there and will continue to be buried there. And the idea that we're gonna turn this possibly into something where someone's gonna make a profit off of it is rather distasteful in my mind. I think the idea that we had a unanimous request by this entity saying that they think we should keep this, we should be listening to them. We evidently as a body listen to a lot of people who get into our heads about what they think should be happening. These are important people to be listening to, so I think we can move on, honestly. I wouldn't support getting rid of this property at all.
And just to reiterate, I have no opinions either way. I'm just bringing this to the table so that we can discuss it and pros and cons and what we feel like is not worth bringing up again. And that is that is my sole purpose of bringing this, is just to lead the discussion.
There we go.
So, just so we know. Can we say that as an action as far as removing it as a future discussion, or do we just kind of? No, okay, well. Hannah, Linky.
I don't know that it needs to be an action item. I think that, again, the presentation, I'd like to know when was the last time we moved into a new section, those kind of, I mean, there's a lot of data that I think is necessary to know where we're at, because I don't know that the question is selling all or none.
Right.
Maybe there's a small portion, you know, do people really want, buried at the corner of Southway and whatever that street is, those kind of things, so I don't think we need an action item. I agree that, when we talk about privatization, it takes away, but it doesn't mean it's less economical for the public, and it sometimes can be much more, of a relief coming out of a city that's got a lot of, needs to take care of, so I'm not ready to take it off the table in its entirety.
Thank you. Do we have any more?
Counselor, can
Sorry,
I
go
just
ahead,
throw something in there? Yeah, just from an administrative standpoint, which is the role that I fill here, I think Counselor Spickelmeyer is correct that it would be good for the council to hear from members of the Parks and Recreation, the Cemetery Division for sure, because they have many things to share with the council about future interments. So my understanding is that we're seeing more and more cremations, which extends the life of this property because it's not traditional in that sense. I think the part of the property that borders Southway Avenue is a candidate for future commercial development, and that doesn't have to be inconsistent with the existing uses. And I'm not even certain that that would be ideal for internment there of any fashion. So I think when we get into that, we'll be able to hear from the cemetery folks and then maybe entertain some ideas about how we might consider future development there. That's one of the things that the city can do when we start looking at trying to help out with growth of the city and trying to provide other opportunities. So that's the perspective that I'll bring back when we hear from the cemetery folks and talk about that. We may find out there's some opportunities there. To answer the question about what some of this land is currently being used for, I did ask the Parks Department and the Public Works Department to give me plans for that property and how it's being used today, and they each provided those plans to me, and I have submitted them to the neighbors around this property, and I've asked them to review those plans and to offer any suggestions for edits or improvements on how it's managed to cut down on dust or noise or smells and things like that. So they're currently looking at those, and I do intend to get those back from them, and I'll share them with Director Johnson and Director Barker to see if there's some changes we can do in operations to make sure that we're being good neighbors up there. Thank you.
Mayor, can you just add that to a future agenda to have them present, or do you need someone to make for when we get to the agenda?
I can get it on there. Councilor Spickelmeyer mentioned it, but we can certainly get them in front of us. I know that Director Barker has talked to us a little bit about it in the past, but you know, if you need a more complete picture, I'm sure I can work something out with him to get them here so they can talk about, first of all, how to operate a cemetery, you know, and what goes on and how decisions are made. It'd probably be educational for all of us, but it may help you in some of your thinking or your decision making as we look at this and thoroughly vet this, so, but I'm happy to do that.
Yes, please, thank you. Are we okay to move on from cemetery? All right, moving on. Next on the agenda is a tiny piece of property, if I remember correctly, that had a swing set on it. It was kind of an old park, but is no longer being used and more just maintained.
And that's the North Lewiston, correct?
Yeah, East End and Park, yes, correct. Oh, I'm sorry, I was just reading the East End Park directions, yes, East West. So this seems like maybe a valuable, I don't know if this was the one where kids were upset by us taking it away, that might have been, was it that one? And that was, what year was that, Tim?
08 or 09. Or 11.
Maybe not that far back, but
Yeah.
close.
Moss was still here.
Yeah.
So that's been a while, so it might be worth revisiting to see if that's still a essential thing for people to have. I kind of get feelers out, I guess, on that would be my opinion, but obviously we're here to hear what anybody feels about the property, so.
I could,
Go ahead,
I'll
Tim.
be very brief. There's no irrigation there. It's probably less than 2 acres. It's behind the Twin County United Way building, which is across from El Sombrero on East Main Street. Basically, it butts up neighbors, and then there is a business to the vacant land, and then a business to the east of it. But it hasn't been really, it's mowed, but it's not really maintained, and the playground structure hasn't been there for the last 12 or 13 years. So there's nothing on the property.
Hannah Leaky. Do we know the population of 0 to 19-year-olds that may want to use that space? Is this something that possible grant could be to have improvements, especially where we have the United Way? There's some partners there. Is that, or is it, is there a plan for, I guess, is for this property? That would be my idea, but is there a plan in the long term?
In the last update to the Park and Open Space Master Plan in 2011, it was noted in the plan for as property to be surplused. So that's the plan.
Council Spickmeyer.
I guess the question is, if a property is gonna be put up for sale, it goes through the whole process of community comment and,
Correct.
correct?
I believe so. If I asked about that, but we don't have the emails from that. There is a process they have to follow. A process, council passes resolution declaring that 1, the property is underutilized or not used for public purpose. 2, the value of the minimum price, if any, the city intends to receive for the property can be a minimum dollar amount or explanation of intended exchange for other monetary consideration. City clerk publishes summary of the resolution in Tribune and provides notice of public hearing. Notice must be published 14 days prior. Public hearing is held. If property is to be sold, then it must be sold at a public auction to the highest bidder for at least the minimum value declared by council. If no bids are received, then the council can sell the property as deems the best interest of the city. Council passes resolution making conveyance and authorizes the mayor to execute the deed. Conveyance documents, if the property is to be exchanged, then it must be exchanged for real property of equal value. Pursuit, 2 terms that shall be a matter of public record. There's more into that, but, and I can send that, or I can forward that on if anybody else needs it, but yeah, it would go to a public hearing.
So if there was issues that, like before, then they would have a chance to speak.
Correct. As far as I read the legal document, yes, I looked at legal for that. Anybody else?
It would seem to be a property that we could be starting the process then. And if we get public input from the neighborhood that says, no, we want this to continue, then I guess we'd ask, how can you help us make this something other than just a place for us to mow? Some input and some help from the community.
Anybody else? Okay. Moving on to these. This is a plot that's kind of right next to homeowners. And as far as I understood it, they could possibly extend their property line. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. And so that was kind of the discussion here, is if we sold this and then possibly bring that out for homeowners to decide if they would. I think it'd still have to go out to bid like a normal piece of surplus property, correct?
That'd be a great Kayla question. I would assume so. So this property is, if you've probably driven by it a million times on 11th. You kind of have that corner market on the northwest corner. And then Jennifer is back behind you on the southwest. But there's a little sign there that says Rotary. I think back in the day, this was kind of adopted as Rotary Park at the time. But it's essentially a hillside adjacent to property owners. We maintain it. There's no recreational value or use to it. There's no access for vehicles. It's just property that we maintain as the city. And there's no plan to further develop it. But my thought process would have been is, talk to the adjacent property owners, see if there's interest in them acquiring it, puts it back on the tax roll, and then we're no longer having to maintain it. And it expands their property, which eventually gives them a greater value.
We get any, whether that could be a process that we could, it doesn't sound like we could follow just like that, but I wanted clarification for that.
So, sorry.
Kayla Herman, City Attorney. So that process that Counselor Forsman outlined earlier applies to any conveyance of city-owned property. You did mention there are certain caveats. For example, if the city wanted to swap property with another governmental entity or transfer property to another governmental entity. But you're exactly right, that process has to be followed for all conveyances of property owned by the city.
Thank you. Look, Mike, go ahead.
So Director, do you know about, how wide is it?
She probably doesn't realize you're still talking.
Remember?
Or the department. I thought you were talking to Kayla
Let's
still.
see it.
I'm sorry.
I can't remember. It's mostly hillside.
I was gonna say, there's a big slope there.
40 feet wide maybe. Not super wide at all. We have to take our smaller mower up through there. Our trim mower needs to go up through there to be able to mow that area. And just to mention on the neighbors, we did that similarly with the East End Park. Reached out to the neighboring business who had an interest at that time. I would just want, before we were to surplus it, I mean, nobody besides the neighbors, I would assume, would have interest in that property. It's not large enough to develop it for anything else. But if neighbors did have interest in acquiring it, then I would support moving forward with that surplus process.
Okay, so Tim, just so I can reiterate, are you okay reaching out to the homeowners, or how do you wanna, how does that work? To see if they're, sorry if I misunderstood that, I just wanted action forward.
Yeah, if there's interest from the council in pursuing that, I'd be happy to reach out or look into it further.
Other than me, I'm interested, but I wanna make sure.
Oh, I would welcome the surplus, and I think the word Rotary came from back when they were selling dogwood trees, the Rotary Club was, and they raised them on that slope, so that, I believe that's what was going on there.
Anybody else?
No, I think that's fine, yeah.
Thank you, Tim, that'd be
There you
great. Okay, moving on to, well, we could either talk about, let's see. Nope, the Fifth and Bryden. So I know we had that property where we were in the process of building a fire station, and then due to circumstances, we have put that on hold, or I'm not sure if we're revisiting or how that works and how much we can discuss on that, but thoughts or opinions on that? Vicky?
How much can we discuss?
Yeah, that's what I'm like, I don't.
We stick to the property, it's not gonna stick to the property. It's gonna turn into a fire station conversation.
Well, I would say the agenda item is a discussion on undeveloped city properties.
Well, I would like to see at least one thing happen with that, in my opinion, go somewhere with it. So are we going to continue and bring up what we originally planned for that piece of property, or are we gonna look at this at a different avenue and maybe think of different ways to utilize that? Impactful here. Yeah, thoughts, opinions? Schroeder?
I just think it's a little I don't know that everybody's made up their mind what they're going to do with this, and I would hate to.
Councilors, I'm gonna remind you to
Sorry.
speak up, because I know there's folks at home that wanna listen.
Sorry, I generally project too much and, and I'm thinking and I can't think and project at the same time, sorry. I think it's just a little too soon. I think it's a very valuable piece of property. And I don't know that it's been checked off of everybody's list not to use it. So I would rather check with the entities that might have a stay in it and want to see something done with it before we just make a decision to surplus it.
Everybody kind of in this
I agree with that.
Vicky?
I'm one vote, and discussion has been had on this particular project for years. So at this point, I'll continue the conversation, but I'm not in support of anything being built that is a city service on that property.
Well, so I guess moving forward, Mayor, and I don't know, but could we bring back to light to decide, maybe bring it up in a discussion to decide what we are going to plan to do with that property, like at a future meeting?
Yeah, no decisions being made today, so we
Correct.
can always bring it back up.
Okay, well, we'll table that then. I don't know if that's the correct term, but I will. Okay, moving on to community park. So, you probably, I don't know if you have you probably don't have a handout for that.
No, I don't.
Sorry, I thought you guys did. But, so there is, as he said, there's 150 dedicated to the outside park area, but there is 37 acres to possibly sell, and surplus. Am I correct in that, Tim? Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Just wanna make sure, okay.
187 total, yeah. So
Yeah.
37 that's non-designated to Land and Water Conservation Fund.
So that could be a valuable option. Maybe finding some people that might wanna bring something valuable into that area that might benefit its future needs. Mayor?
Counselor Forsman, thank you. Director Barker, have you completed all the conversions out there? Do we know where those 37 acres are?
No, and that's, Mr. Mayor, Council, Tim Barker, Parks and Rec Director. We don't at this point yet, still working with the National Park Service to identify what they're willing to accept. Some of those 37 acres within the within the community park master plan, that identifies something to be developed on the entire 187 acres. And so that's where we would have a discussion on the 37 that's non-designated. What would we keep in there? What wouldn't we? How would we adjust those lines? Some of that too, of the 37 acres we've identified for potential commercial development as well. So whether we'd sell the property or whether we'd lease the property, that could be potential revenue. So there's numerous factors that go into place. But the conversion process has not been completed. And that conversion process that the mayor mentions is in 2004, when we purchased the property, we identified certain 150 acres to be LWCF. Since LC changed their use of what they originally intended, we included interior roadways. There's been some movement and shifting in the site. And so now what we would be proposing as a conversion would change from what the original intent was. With Land and Water Conservation Fund, what they want to see is to make sure that there aren't a loss of recreational amenities and that they can that we can maintain the amount of acreage that was originally dedicated. Keeping that brief.
Let us know when you got it done.
Years.
I would offer that to look at the community park at this point is a little premature because we don't even know what part of that park that we could parcel out. We're just spitballing. I don't wanna spitball.
Anybody else on the same agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's any way we could do anything at this point anyway. I'm sure that the public sees that there's vacant land there that we're not using, but it is tied into the rest of it at this point, and so we would have to wait till all of that is finalized, from what I'm hearing, so, and that's gonna take years, so.
Well, I guess we'll have to scratch that off the table for years. Okay, well, that was really, unless anybody had any others to add, Ms. Spiegelmeier?
wasn't there a piece of land that was like across the road from the veterans home?
Yeah, as far as I understood that, it wasn't very build-friendly property, cause we're using it as a water,
Drainage swale,
say that again, sorry,
drainage swale.
drainage soil. So I don't know if that compromises the land itself to build on. Share a little more on that.
So I guess my question, I know it's a small piece, but do we mow it or do anything with it?
End of the yard.
Yes, we maintain it. We mow it about the same amount probably a little more often than we typically do with our right-of-way area, just because it grows a little bit more. But yeah, it's a stormwater runoff area. And depending on what document you look at, and we're trying to clean this up with Modi Park Conservancy, you're going to be seeing soon a new agreement with the Conservancy, an MOU that we're working on. But there's documents within previous Modi Park Conservancy MOU that states that the city has dedicated it as parkland for future development of Modi Park. So that's something we'll have to consider, but it is a wetland, essentially a runoff area right now.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Well, I still think we did have some direction, if I'm not mistaken, Mayor, as far as some properties that we could continue to talk about, which was the East End Park, and getting more information on just cemetery and that property and what it's utilized for and whether that's still whether that should still be continued to be discussed, and then as well as reaching out to the owners about if they would even be interested in expanding, and if so, then it would need to go through the surplus process. Does that sound correct, everybody, for future? Well, I am done with my taking the floor. Would I bang the gavel for no reason?
Well, you can pass it over, yeah. You might
I'll
wanna
pass it back to the mayor.
Get it out of your
Thank you, Mayor.
system, yeah, okay. Thank you, Counselor. All right, next up, we have item D, the assigned building fund. This is a discussion regarding the use of pre-approved funding in FY '24 from the 2023 assigned building fund. This is an action item, and we have Ms. Valerie Warren with us today to give maybe a quick update on that, and then council questions. So, Ms. Warren, please welcome, introduce yourself for the record, and remember to speak up loudly and clearly.
Valerie Warren, Parks and Recs Facility Supervisor, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for listening. I just wanted to present to you some redesignation of part of the assigned building fund. There was a large portion that was there for the fire department, for Fire Station 4, which we're not doing. But I would like to ask for some funds to repair the current Fire Station 4. And those funds involve $86,000 for a 15-year warranted roof. Electrical, just to get it safe and make it up to code where there's proper outlets and some fixtures that need replaced. That's $13,000. Abatement in the truck bay, that involves getting rid of the soot and sealing up all the soot in the truck bay for $12,292. We need to install the egress window in the bedroom so that it's a legal bedroom. I'm still waiting for that bid. There's 2 bedrooms. The one is not legal egress. If I update the one, I need to do the other. I guessed at $15,000. I'm not sure on that one. And then the heat shield for the truck bay heaters. They take a beating from the truck equipment and the vehicle exhaust that comes off of it, and they just need redone. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. Then I'm going to ask if Director Gordon could maybe just give us just a real quick explanation of why you're here today, Ms. Warren, to ask for some help accessing those dollars. Director, welcome.
Thanks, Mayor. Amy Gordon, City Treasurer. So the assigned building fund is established in city code, and it has a fairly general description of that fund, that it's to be used for improving or building needed governmental buildings or properties. So in the fiscal year 2023 budget, we had worked off an assumption that the Fire Station 4 was going to get constructed at Fifth and Brighton. And if it had gotten constructed at the price that we had at that time, it would have had to utilize all the funds remaining in that account as well as the current year funding for that account. So the code also says that that fund is to be directed by council. So kind of similar to your contingency fund, this fund requires kind of council direction on how we use those funds. So the current budget is written to build Fire Station 4. With that project on hold and looking at some needed improvements at the current station, we would just want council to provide consensus that they were comfortable repurposing the funds as they currently sit in the budget. And then going into fiscal year 24, the way we wrote that in the budget was projects to be determined by council. So that will give, in 24, will give council the ability to, as they prioritize needs, deferred maintenance needs or other facility needs of the city, council will be kind of directing how to use those funds in 24. So similar to what we're asking now is just getting a consensus, if you're comfortable, moving forward with these improvements at Station 4, utilizing those funds.
Director Gordon, it's my understanding, and Val, just give me a heads up or down, that there may be a couple of other items in addition to Station 4 that we would want to spend these monies on? Yeah. So are we limited just to Station 4 or any of the capital improvements?
For my suggestion today, I've just put Station 4 on here for right now.
But there
As an
could be other
emergent need.
projects, could be
But-
other projects that you need to,
There will be, yes, I do have quite a few other projects that I have been getting estimates and pricing for that we will need to address. There's three other roofs in the city that we have to complete this next year. Some other
but we're
much
talking
needed
about out of this fiscal year 23 spending these dollars, and I just want to make sure that council understands that it could be something other than Station 4.
It could be, yes.
And we're allowed to do that, Director Gordon? Council consensus?
Well, I think what I would be looking for today is a consensus that you were comfortable with the projects that Valerie outlined today.
Councilors? I think Councilor Speckelmeyer had his hand up a minute ago. No? Okay, Councilor Lidkey?
Valerie, can you just speak to this roof, but the other three and what you've done? Because this cost is much less than what we'd previously heard, and
Yeah, I'm excited.
I want you to brag a little bit.
Yeah. So I sourced some new vendors that I met at a facilities expo and had them come, because they are wanting more work in the area, had them come and give me some quotes on 4 of the roofs here in town, all 3 of which have metal on them. They have a new product that can go on this metal, on our existing metal as a coating versus a replacement or a secondary metal sheeting over top. The price difference is night and day. The price for the metal coating on here is $9,000. The price for the metal to be completely redone, over $100,000. So it's no brainer, but you could, same warranty, you go with the coating. As a note, in 15 years, you will have to take off that metal and redo it. But you're buying 15 years for a very low price. So that's how come the prices have come down.
Counselor Forsman?
If we decided to move on with getting a different building for a fire station, and we got rid of that building, would we need to repair this roof anyway to sell it?
Yes.
Make code or whatever?
You would, yeah, and there's, some of the electrical and the abatement, as well.
And would the window need to be addressed regardless?
If you want to list it as a bedroom, yes.
Thank you.
Counselor Kleber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, we saved a bunch of money to build a new fire station. Now that money's just sitting there. I would just caution council about getting in a very big hurry to go blowing through that cash, because it's taken the city 7 years probably to raise that funding for the fire station. I don't think fire stations are getting any cheaper, and I don't think that we can deny the fact that it's probably time to get out of that building and get into a new building. So I just want the council to be aware of that. You know, I can see borrowing some of the money to fix a few things, but just remember, we're gonna have to replace that building eventually, probably sooner than later.
Counselor Townsley?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Kleberg. I also know that if we were to start the process of a new firehouse today, it would probably be 2 years before anybody would talk about getting into it anyway. So it needs to be done. It needs to be done, that's all. So I support this. But we're just discussing this, is that right?
Counselor Spicklemeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, and I support all the changes that you want to make, but I'm a firm believer in sticking with the budget. I'd rather see it moved into the 2024, and that's approve it then, rather than change, or, the 23 budget now.
One thing with that, the roof will sustain damage because that'll put it into spring before the roof can get done. Will be damage that occurs to the roof.
Gotta speak up. There's folks at home want to hear what you have to say, Valerie. Thank you.
The roof will incur damage. The report I got back has open seams, visibly just even to the naked eye where water is getting in. So if we postpone it, the reason I brought it today is to get this done and make it safe as cheaply as possible. I searched news sources in different ways to just repair it so that it's safe without spending a whole lot of money. Because it needs done sooner than later to keep the damage down.
Counselor Litkey?
Valerie, these are all projects that we would not have to have our firemen and women move out, correct?
The abatement in the truck bay, they'll have to move out each day while the work is going on, and some of the electrical as well, but they can move back in at night, correct?
Or comment.
Counselor Litkey?
Going off of the numbers I remember in my head, before we put money into this, we had about 6.5 million with these repairs, and I didn't catch the projected cost of the heat shield for the vehicles, but it was well under 200,000. One of the things that I think that for me, and talking with the firemen, who I also feel are a very important part of this, they have 3 fire stations that they're living in that all have deferred maintenance, all safety issues, all things. When I hear egress window, I hear fire safety, and we don't even have that in our own firehouse. So I'm very much in support of doing this as quickly as possible, and I'd love to hear other ideas to get our fire stations where our firemen are taken care of. So I'm full in support as fast as we can do it, because I think we have waited too long to to make sure our service people are safe.
Counselor Schroeder?
I do agree that we need to take care of the fire station, even if we're going to be moving out of it and selling it at some point in time. It needs to be maintained. And it needs to be maintained safely for the people that are working in it currently and probably will be for several years at this point. So I'm in favor of doing what needs to be done for that.
Motion in order.
I don't think we do a motion, we're just looking for a consensus, so if, it sounds like maybe we have, Counselor Speckelmeyer has some concerns with that, you know. Counselor, I don't know, maybe some money's have been spent in other capital projects, you know, golf course, for example, trying to get that back online last year when we had to take over that contract and things like that, that ate up some of, I think, Valerie's budget. And so we're just trying to, I think, get through the fiscal year as best we can. I don't think the intent is to spend on anything that we can't afford or anything maybe that's not needed, but if I understand Ms. Warren correctly, some of these items, if we don't hit the window now, then they're gonna have to wait till next year, and then we just have to deal with it then, you know, whatever the expenses may be, so. Counselor Forsman?
Just want to make sure I had my, since you're looking for a consensus. I'm in support of making sure that we're taking care of these buildings. I've been in that station, I take a tour in it, and it's in massive need of a facelift. And so, I'm in support of that, and I want to make sure we're taking care of. I just wanted to make sure I was asking the questions for the public, because, obviously, we need to make sure we're highlighting all the variables as far as that goes. So I appreciate you answering my questions, and I am supportive of this. I am in support of this.
Let me say one more based off what you just said. These are just repairs. Anybody other than me will probably never notice what I did to spend this money because it's nothing pretty. There's no pretty flooring, there's no new kit, none of that. This is just to make sure the outlets are electrically safe to plug into, the bedroom's got an egress window, and the roof is not leaking. That's all this is. This is nothing pretty until you guys decide what you want to do. I don't want to spend money on that part.
Facelift gives off that impression.
Yeah,
So
that's
thank
fine.
you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
To me, there's a big difference between a repair and $240,000. Repair a leaky roof.
This is 86,000.
Isn't that what the number was?
For everything she
Prior.
listed wasn't 200,000, is what my comment was. Everything she listed didn't total 200.
No, it might not even total 150. It did before, because I didn't have the roofing source that I found now that cut 100 grand off the top.
Kayla, I have to phone a friend. What action are we permitted to take today?
Well, it's up to council. If you'd like, you could make a motion to redesignate the funds for the purposes outlined in Valerie's presentation or a general consensus. I think what Director Gordon referred to earlier was just making it clear that this is the direction council wants to go with those funds. So it's up to council and your comfort level.
Thank you. Council, it doesn't sound like we have consensus, and so with that, I would entertain a motion if there is one.
I can remember what Kayla said. To move, may I make a motion?
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. I move that we would move to appropriate funds for Station 3.
We're gonna
Four.
use the building fund. We're not gonna appropriate funds per se, but just to use the assigned building fund for repairs at Station 4.
Use the assigned building fund for repairs that need to be done to Fire Station 4.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, by Councilor Townsley to use the assigned building fund to do repairs at, needed repairs at Station 4. Is there discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, counselors, all of you. Warren, you have your orders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gordon. Counselors, next we move to Roman numeral 6, unfinished and new business. Item A, city councilor comments. Comments should not be related to an item currently before the council or an item that may come before the council in the foreseeable future and shall be limited to comments, not discussion. Counselors, any comments tonight? Well, okay, we're going to keep moving. That's fine. City boards and commission liaison updates. Are there any? Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. On August 1st, we had a Valley Vision meeting and we had election of officers and our new chair is Michelle Bly. They did do a review of their annual meeting, which unfortunately, I was up north, a few steps from the lake, enjoying my great-grandbabies and my grandchildren, and so I did not, and children. And so I was not there and present for it, but it sounded like a very wonderful event, and I'm very sad to have missed it. And so they're doing good things and bringing floor slides in and had the groundbreaking for them, so end of that.
Thank you, Counselor. Council updates? No? Okay. Mayor comments? I'm going to ask Clerk Rocky to help me with this one to make sure that I get it correct, but just by way of a, almost like a public service announcement, but those interested in serving on the Lewiston City Council can pick up a packet at the clerk's office between August 28th and September 8th.
They can pick packets up now. The filing period is between August 28th and September 8th.
You can pick up the packets at the city clerk's office now, and the filing period is August 28th to September 8th. So anybody in the audience or those listening at home, there's your opportunity to serve. And then also just Carolyn Eads has left a cake in the back for everyone who would like a piece of cake and a glass of milk. So thank you for your generosity. And there's a nice card back there if you care to read it. They usually have a very nice message in them. Roman numeral 60, advisory board and commission appointments. This is an action item. Number 1, Historic Preservation Commission, considering the appointment of Tamara Burlick to a 3-year term. I move to approve the appointment of Tamara Burlick to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilor Forsman to approve the appointment of Tamara Burlick to the Historic Preservation Commission. Is there discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We move now to item D2, Public Works Advisory Commission, considering the appointments of Gabe Icaboni and Brent Barassa to 3-year terms. I'm going to withdraw my motion to appoint Gabe Icaboni to the Public Works Advisory Commission. I'm not prepared to make that motion today. The second one, motion to approve I move to approve the appointment of Brent Barassa to the Public Works Advisory Commission.
Second.
Who's the second? Councilor Schroeder. It's been moved by Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to approve the appointment of Brent Barassa to the Public Works Advisory Commission. Is there discussion?
Mayor,
Councilor Forsman?
just for clarity, we're voting members on the Public Works, right? Kathy, so we still can vote though for an appointment of, it's not like a conflict even though we're voting, because usually we're just like liaisons to a committee, so we're voting member. So does that matter?
I don't think so. You're the council. Yeah, you
No. Okay.
can vote. Councilor, thank you. You have all rights.
Thank you.
Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We now move to item E under unfinished and new business, agenda topics. Don't see any. Okay.
Mayor,
Nope. Pardon me, Councilor Spickmeyer.
did they need to add that one with the cemetery commission, or were you just gonna add it?
Councilor, I put it on my notes right here, cemetery presentation. So I will talk to Parks and Recs to get someone here to go over that. It should be interesting to talk about what's going on and give us some good information, so I appreciate you asking. But I will make sure we get that on a future work session. We're gonna set fees and rates here pretty soon, but probably maybe not till October. We're just kind of getting full right now with the budgets and everything going on, but I will get it on there. And Clerk Rocky's gonna keep me in shape, make sure I do that, so. Thank you. With that, we'll move to Roman numeral 7, adjournment.
I move to adjourn. Second.
Been moved by Counselor Forsman, second by Counselor Schroeder to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.